use the mouse onto the screen is the other thing. Okay, so let me open you up here. Now, what happens is it's being recorded by the university, but it's not been a reliable system. So I'm also recording it just in case.
All right.
That's what that flashing orange and white thing is.
Okay.
Okay,
Can
so
we plug that in? Have you got another USB?
yes, just so you can put this away. What's
Thank
this
you.
one?
That's my pointer.
Ah, yes. Yes. Okay.
That sounded right.
Now let me see that. All right, everyone. Welcome to the last session, last set of lectures for the semester. So we'll have two lectures today. First of all, we'll have Paul Barnett from Paul Barnett Design Group to talk about risk. And Paul gave a similar lecture last year, which was really useful and very well received by the students of last semester. I'm very pleased that Paul has decided to come back and grace our halls with his presence and his knowledge again. So let's make Paul welcome for his lecture on risk.
No, that's enough. That's enough. We haven't started. Thank you very much, John. I was at uni here. I studied here and finished my second degree in 1986. That puts an age on me. I did 10 years at uni. We have run a practice for 24 years in Canberra, and it was Melissa, wasn't it? No. Melanie, I beg your pardon. And we've done some work with the NCA, and in every job there's risk. And so what I wanted to run you through was a little bit about how risk turns up in each stage of an architectural service on a project, okay? What's the time frame, John, you want me to work to?
Talk for 45 minutes or so.
Okay.
And then we'll open up for questions.
Let me know when we get within 5 or 10 minutes, would you?
Will do.
Fantastic. I just want to ask a few things. So all of you are fifth year or sixth year students or something?
Fourth or fifth.
Okay. Is this your last lecture?
No.
Oh, all right. Well, nearly there. And how many of you do you think will go on to be an architect? 1, 2. What are you doing here if you're not? So are most of you going to practice architecture or not?
Yes.
Okay. And then have you had practice in other architectural firms?
Yes.
Okay. How many have been in firms less than 5 people? Thank you. Couple. How many have been in more than 20 people in the firm? Okay, so across the board. How many people have been involved in construction on site? Thank you. How many people have specified anything? Documentation, most people have done a bit of documentation. Client meetings? Fee proposals? Okay, cool. So, in other words, that's what I want to go across. So, for my 24 years, and before that I worked with Philip Cox and Partners, the Australian Construction Services and Alan Jack and Collier, a firm in Melbourne and a firm in Byron Bay, which was great. And I left Byron Bay and came here. I've been here ever since. All right, well, I've got about 30 slides. So I thought if I run them through, and then we can come back to things, because there's a bit of interest. So I'll do about a minute a slide, perhaps. This is what we do. We started a business 24 years ago, and I was working in large firms. We worked on a $100 million defence building with the Australian Construction Services. That was Defence Signals Directorate. And from that project ending, I then went and worked for myself. They disbanded that government body. So I was working as a contract architect, consultant architect. And then so I started my own business and I started designing decks and extensions. And there wasn't enough money to make a living and raise a family out of decks and extensions. So I got a builder's license and started building for 3 years as well. So we did design and construct, or we didn't tender, so it was all design and construct. And then we spent the next 2 years, we purchased a QA system and then we developed it for our business. So everyone's familiar with QA, quality assurance, ISO 9000. And then we went to the government and applied and registered. And after a year, I rang up and said to a guy who's now passed away, unfortunately, I said, who do you have to pay to get a job? Because we'd done our time, we'd become registered, but we couldn't get a single job. So he said, well, this was Thursday afternoon, ring in your business cards Monday morning, we'll have a chat. So by Monday afternoon, I had a handrail to do. That's how you could start your practice. So from that, we worked then for many, many years on small works in schools and government works, and gradually build up our portfolio base and our standing. Some people will get lucky and start with big projects really early. But we didn't, we just did it the hard way. And after about 10 years, we were doing lots and lots of work. 90% of our work was handed to us from private and government sources. And then the building education revolution came along. Does anyone remember that? So we were handed about $30 million worth of work from private schools, the Catholic Education Office, and you just say yes. So our practice grew to about 9 people, and then we did a lot of work. There was risk in that, and we came across a few things that challenged us because everyone was working so fast. And all the connections that you make over time with your consultants and trades and builders and suppliers was fine, but then at that time there was 2 or 3 times the amount of building work, so everyone had trouble delivering. So that was that presented its own level of risk. So that's a little bit about our firm. You can ask questions as you go, is that all right? The range of services we do are from full service, so 90% of the work we design, we're involved in the construction administration of. We're very, very hands-on architects. Things just happen. What is risk? You know, risk comes across. I've been listening to some audiobooks about control, and of course you don't really have control because there's so many other people out in the world doing their own thing. So risk will come along when you least expect it. And we've got an example that happened this year, which I'll come to, which we were amazed. And it's affecting the whole industry. In fact, you would have all seen that building that burned down in England, the Alucobond polyethylene, is it? Cladding? We've been using products like that at the request of one of the clients, and then it went from a normal product 7 years ago, then the fire brigade wanted the fire-rated product, and then they wanted it mechanically fixed. And then I found out on 4 corners that even the Alucobond Plus can still burn, and then you go back to the Australian standards. And so that you'll be surprised that even with all the right channels and all the right activities to manage risk, you can still get unstuck. It just can happen. The project I'll talk about a bit later on talks about condensation, so we'll come to that. This here, can everyone see this? I'll see where the pointer is. Can everyone see this? It's a 900 diameter, 9mm thick acrylic tube. And it's for the National Museum, and it's for Indigenous Australians. We did a Victorian and Tasmanian exhibition and worked with exhibitions artists. And vitrines, I think, were the supports for the exhibits. There, it's a possum skin clock. So this was made in Australia, and it's made without a seam. And it's made in Newcastle. And it cost a lot of money. And we had all the Aboriginal elders coming from across Australia to the opening. And 24 hours before, that's a centrepiece exhibit. I don't think the exhibit's the same. This is a few years ago at the National Museum. The person installing it, who we had a manufacturer, and then the cabinet makers installing it, went like this and tripped, and it cracked. So we had that arrive an hour before all the elders were coming for the opening. So they worked overnight, and everyone dropped everything. But when I said things just happen, you don't expect someone to drop the centrepiece. So how do you plan? You can't plan for it. So if they hadn't turned up because the semi-trailer broke down or the machine didn't work, I actually don't know what we would have done, but we would have done something. Maybe we would have put it up without the acrylic. But those sort of things can happen in any job. They've happened in many of our jobs, and often they're no one's particular fault. But the QA process, setting up a project and identifying risk and then creating a risk register and monitoring risk in the meetings. It could be time, budget, or supplied items. It could be shop drawings or some particular detailing that's tricky. We use that in our normal course of our minuted meetings and communication with our subcontractors or project managers. We've got a job working at the moment where there was a delay because of a detailing issue on a tricky roof. And we've still got an end date of January the 1st because there's a preschool and all the kids are booked in. So we've now got, everything was solved about 2 months ago, and we rang everyone and said, oh, well, we've got it solved, how's it going? Oh, it's all gone cold, we're on other things. And so we spent a week talking with everyone, and then on all our emails it's got drop dead, construction date 15th of December, and we had to get people on board and actually get them motivated. That's probably not in your project brief, but we had to get everyone interested again, and half of that is relationships, half of it is knowing what you're talking about, and also being open to the fact that we don't know everything and we rely on others also to help us out. So we were using goodwill and said, please help us, these jobs have been given to us, we've got reputation, and can we all get back on board? So it started. And of course, the only thing that hasn't happened is the windows are not turning up. Because the window manufacturer has now been involved in a larger project, and his liquidated damages costs exceed the entire value of our project, like per week or something, so we're second fiddle. So in a day or two, I'll be ringing and talking with him and pleading and using every trick in the book. Can we just have some windows, 3 windows? Because we can't close up the building. There's about 20 windows we need, and he's working on multi-storey construction. That's just another example of how control can go. Is it my problem? It's a construction manager's problem, and it's the window manufacturer's problem. And then there's 3 trades that are waiting on the windows, and then there's the client who wants to open, and the client came to us and gave us another job. So in a way, it's our problem, and we'll do our best to solve it. So we always include risk and risk management as an agenda item in all our minutes at any stage of a job. That's the topic, isn't it, John? Risk. Risk here, I'll just talk about, that was the Rafa Memorial that we were talking about. And off to the side here, in this position, there's a plaque. The scope of this work doubled in value 8 weeks out, and it included photo-etched granite, cast bronze, and bluestone sourced from a quarry for colour matching. Those 3 things, we had to do all of those. We had to increase the scope of work 8 weeks out. And I was just saying to Melanie, who works with the NCA, what do you do when something like that happens? So we ring the quarry or go to the quarry and say, can you get us this stone? And then we talk to the granite people. Have you got any more slabs? Like, how long will it take to photo etch? Can we do a critical path on the photo etching? Can we talk to the bronze caster? What do you need? What can we do to help? And so that job particularly, when we did that job, we basically dropped everything in the office to get it done. And it was opened by the Prime Minister and Chief Air Marshal Angus Houston, and I just told this to Melanie, but there was a Scottish guy who worked on the bronze work, and he was an installer, but he used to drink a lot. And so we ended up only getting the plaque up an hour before the opening, and it was done with epoxy. So I just sat there in the crowd just hoping it wouldn't fall off. And so risk management got open again. I don't know how, but we can't determine or tell a client when it's the government or ministers who've got some venue or agenda or whatever that we can't do it, or if we can't do it, you say right away, or we can't do it, and they'll either say fair enough or they'll get someone else. I don't know. I don't know what happens to that. We've never said we can't do it. We just kind of work out, well, how do we do it? But definitely risk is always sitting there and thinking, what are the risks? Well, there's no bluestone, that might match. Can the bronze be cast? And so it goes on. So then you identify the risk, and then you've got a critical path against each item. Is that all making sense? I get excited just talking about it. It reminds me of so many interesting projects. That insurances. I lost a lot of money, $160,000 about 7 years ago. And I have professional indemnity insurance. So in the BER, we're asked to put a library childcare centre. BER, so thank you. The BER.
Building the Education Revolution.
Oh, sorry, you're asking, yes. So it was from the Catholic Education Office, yeah. So it was a school site, and we were given $2.5 million to do this building. Because everyone was so busy, we had to find consultants elsewhere, and we sourced hydraulic and service engineers from Sydney. And I worked with some of them locally in another job through another project manager, but I didn't know them well. And the lovely hydraulic engineer checked BEPCON records and ACT mapping, all those other things, and said, no, it's okay to put the building here. And they prepared all the sewer diagrams, and everything was done so-so. Not to the nth degree of documentation. I'm not talking about our build work. I'm talking about generally the consultants and others at that time. It was very hard to get things done because everyone had so much to do. So we have in the is this interesting? Oh, thanks. If you have in specification and preliminaries, builder do site detection, services detection, and we've checked. We've got all the readings from the local authorities, and we can see these 3 lines, and they look like sewer lines. And so we send this to the hydraulic engineers. Can you check that? Yeah, it's okay. Siting's fine. There's nothing there. There's 2, but they're outside the site. Okay. So we go ahead and we document, put it out to tender, comes in, and then they go to service detect, and 5 metres down there's a 500 millimetre diameter sewer main, and that sewer main is non-gazetted, and there's no easement gazetted. It was on old ACTU blueprint records, but not on the public register. And so we call everyone in, and ACTU and the certifier who was about to get a C of O, so we're already digging footings, waiting, to pour the concrete because everything's fast. We need the C of O today, the BA, the building approval today, because we're ready to pour. And so he said, I'm just having trouble, I haven't got ACTU sign off. So the short of it was, we had to redesign both buildings. We had to redesign this one building. We had to redesign it as 2 buildings in 2 different locations at our cost. We then tried to sue the consultancy firm because they stuffed up. We asked them, they confirmed it, no, go ahead. But they were a really big consultancy firm, and they had 3 lawyers on their staff. So it cost me $13,000 in letters, and then I was told if I spent $70K and engaged the Queen's Counsel, I'd get about $160 back. But I had to spend 70 plus the 13. So do the sums, and it would take 2 years. So after a while, I said, we'll leave it. So the professional indemnity insurance was of no value because no one was suing me. You might have another way of approaching it, but at the time, we had to get the job done. So we ended up doing a year's work on that project for free. And how did that happen? As I've described. I mean, everything's in place. You ask the consultant, they give you the info. You cannot guarantee that anything anyone tells you in your entire professional career will be accurate. And that's actually a fact. And to verify it, you can go and set out and verify it, and you still can't be 100% sure. Even though you follow these processes, you follow your risk management, you check the building code, you check the standards, you check consultants, you check industry, you check trade. My experience over 24 years is that all of those have caused grief, and things have come undone when you think you've got something signed off.
So
yes, John?
Paul, how did you find out about this ungazetted pipe? Was it ACTU who finally got back to the building certifier?
The building certifier, who was also rushed, and we hadn't used them before. So you spread everything. Everything got spread. If you remember, there was problems with insulation at the time. Is there a drink of water I can get, John? And I'll just answer that.
You go ahead. I'll organise the water.
So we couldn't get a building approval because ACTU hadn't released the documents because they're swamped. And then the builder found the sewer main by doing services detection. And it's 5 metres down. And to 5 metres is a long way, isn't it? So if it was a sewer main that sits round and has to be fixed, they have to dig a 5 metre wide trench and then a 2.5 metre wide trench. 2 metres and 2 to get to the pot. You with me? So they have to dig this like as big as the room of trench to fix it. So that determines how far the buildings had to be away, and we had a building over the top of it. I mean, you can sit there and think, idiots. Why did you do that? Because we went through the channels to determine if there was something there, and there wasn't. And then actually said, it's great when you talk to people. Ruby was involved. Ruby's a project manager in office, and also my oldest daughter. She's worked with me since she was 14, so she's seen all this. Actually, we're very smug. Well, why didn't you ask us? And so bring Actu tomorrow and ask a question, and see what you get. So, so we thought we'd done the right thing. We asked the specialist, the consultant. The consultant knows. And we can work with 10 to 20 consultants. We've worked with paint specialists, that's a consultant. Disabled access, acoustic, security, fire, just alternative fire solutions report. All of these people link together like this web to get a result. So we thought we'd done the right thing.
Can I just ask you, the die before you dig, so it wouldn't have shown up on something like that?
We got 3 lines on die before you dig, but they're not locational necessarily.
Yeah, okay.
And because there's 3 lines, we set that to the consultants.
Is it what are these?
Yeah, what are these?
Yeah.
Oh, it's fine, there's only 2, don't know what the other ones.
Yeah, right. So it was
You probably think, oh yeah, well what was the other? Well, we know what the other one was now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dive before you dig, look at it all, but scrutinise it.
Yeah.
And also, like we always say that
Thanks, John.
the land is so old now.
Yeah.
Actually did apologise and say, well, it's actually not gazetted. It's not. But we know it's there because we've got records to show it was put in 1930 or something. I don't know. So anyway, that was the sewer. And I had professional indemnity insurance, right? But I couldn't get a penny. So that was hard. Have any of you costed a job? Have any of you done private jobs? The most likelihood of getting sued will be by a domestic client. I was told that when I studied, and it's true. Because it's their money. It's like if you went to an architect, you sir, go to an architect, and say, I've got $300,000, but not a penny more. And then you design it for this gentleman. We did a job, you know the job I'm talking about? It was the shed. We did a job and the brief was, I want this. Just perfect. I don't wear bow ties, but I felt like putting one on. And so we designed this beautiful job and costed it, and it was 25% over his budget. And so I don't want to pay any more. I love it. So we redesigned it and simplified it. And then he didn't want to pay for quantity surveyor. Look, unless you're really good at costing, I've paid builders to price jobs. And builders, when they're pricing jobs for a cost estimate, are optimistic. And when builders price jobs as a tender, they're either desperate or they're going to put in fat. Like, it's really hard to get the right costing. And so I work with my brother sometimes. He will do a 20-page cost estimate nail by nail. To get a cost for a domestic job and not spend the whole budget on the QS report, you could find a QS to give you advice. And we're involved in buildings from Wauchope or Macquarie to Canberra that range in price per square metre from $1,800 a square metre to $5,400 a square metre. So what I can give them a spread. So if they've got 100 square metres, it's that to that. So budget-wise, it's very hard with budget. So we put it out to tender this job, and then how am I going for time? I'm probably through 4 slides. It came in and it was still about 40,000 over budget. Now, on the life of a building, and by the way, since it's built, that house has gone up probably in value. We did build something. But he said, I'm not spending a penny over, and he wasn't happy. So I've gone to tender. I've actually gone to tender twice, and then I negotiate. So we dumbed it down further, but it's not what the original brief was. The brief was about timing, cost, scope, quality, and cost. But in the end, he dug his heels in on cost. Now, I don't know what was happening in his life, and I don't know what was happening behind that. How could I have started the job and said, what's the most important thing about this project? Oh, money. I'm not going to spend more than $300,000. If you heard that, you'd accommodate it, would you? And then as you're designing, you can either say to yourself, actually, this is over budget. But that wasn't the briefing path we had. I think they enjoyed the joy of working with an architect. I've come across clients who took us on a ride of design and said we decided to get a portable home. I think they just like the joy of working with an architect. Don't even discount that. If you come across that, you got to start to read it. What is driving this? And that's domestic projects, I think, are the hardest, because otherwise you're working with building professionals. People who, project managers, building managers, who build buildings. And that's what they're involved in the industry. That's pretty straightforward. That's probably 80% of our work. But the domestic client, which, you get out of uni, you get registered, you're working with someone, you do weekend work, you do an extension renovation. Run it at QA level as much as you can and return the information. So I understand you want this, this and this. It's called a return brief. What did you say? You said this. Return it to them and ask them to verify it. It's about managing risk through polite, systematic communication and verification. All right, so that was client funds. That was briefing we've talked about a little bit. We did a job. This brings up bad memories as well, talking about risk, because I'm ranking up all the things that caused me to lose hair. We had a client who was sent to me from another architect. What does that tell you? And do you know what I did? Great! Another job, a whole house. So my friend, who's still my friend, who sent me this job, I can't work with them. That's all right. I get on with people. I will work with them. And they came to my house on Saturday nights and Wednesday nights for 3-hour meetings twice a week for 6 months. What do you think my fee proposal said? Briefing meetings. It was when I first started the business. How many meetings are you going to allow when you put together a fee proposal? So a fee proposal, you need to say, what do you want? And this is what it will cost. And this is the limit. For the CPS Credit Union, we did 18 planning options for one of their branch offices. How many are you going to do? Just define it, quantify it. Otherwise, you end up learning it from scratch like I did. You start to say, next time let's put a limit on the number of meetings, and then evaluate additional meetings cost this. And by the way, that will get rid of a lot of problems. But there's a lot of people, developers particularly, if someone comes to you because they want a house, you know their motivation and you know it's their money. If someone comes to you who wants to develop something, they're there to make money. It's a different agenda. So they're there to make money. It's good if everyone else doesn't cost them much. So you also need to factor in who are you dealing with and how do you manage that. There's plenty of stories of people doing work for free on both domestic clients and developer clients, and any client that you want to keep a good relationship with if sometimes things go off the rail, and it could be your fault, their fault, or someone else's fault. How are we doing for time, John?
We've probably got about 20 minutes.
About half. I'll skip it along a bit. Compliance with local authorities. We do a lot of projects in the hospitals. I don't like hospitals. They're such, most hospitals I understand, if you look into hospital design, is around, and I've heard this from others, so it's not my opinion. It's designed around the administration of a hospital, not around the health of the individual. And that might sound a bit harsh, but that's what I've read. I've just read that. And it's because to administer a hospital, it's a whole world. Everything from service, cleaning, mechanical systems that are dealing with, germs and bacteria. So it's a big deal. So we did a job here, and the compliance, we had volumes, several hundred mils thick on hospital guidelines and then the requirements. And we hadn't worked before. I've done chemistry labs, but not hospital work. So from a risk management perspective, if a new job comes in, it's an interesting one, we were given the job to design a cryogenic storeroom, which is liquid nitrogen, and they're storing their research stem cells. And It's called what, Canberra Hospital? It's that bloke, isn't it? So there was a whole lot of research on that, and they wanted backup systems that didn't kill people if the liquid nitrogen spilled. But they also wanted backup systems so they didn't lose their research. They had a budget that was a third the cost. And in fact, we did this box. 2/3 of the work was mechanical systems. And so I was hauled in 20 people that went over budget. And I talked to 20 people in the room, including our own quantity surveyor, who was on quite supportive. And I said, well, this is the breakdown. I said, you've allocated a budget, but on what? I said, just the building alone costs about 6% of the budget. And that's just a basic building cost. Concrete block with a roof, secure mesh. And then there's all these systems and backup systems. So I said, so when you spell it all out, how did you allocate the budget? And then, fortunately, we've done our homework, the quantity surveyor agreed with us. So that goes back to, it's got to comply. So I don't think they tested their budget against compliance. Often you get clients, I've found, and Melanie, you might correct me, some money is found, some money is allocated to do this, but often the correlation between the scope and the complexity of the work does not align with the budget that's been allocated. So one of the first things you probably want to do is test the brief, test your scope of service, then test the budget. You can test the budget really fast. What is it you want? Oh, we want this, 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 and this. How many square metres do you need and what equipment do you need? Oh, yeah, okay. And then multiply it by $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a square metre and see the difference. And see if, so at 2,000 a square metre, which we might be able to do a shed. We can do this, and at 4,000 it will cost this, and it's 200 square metres, so it's 800,000. Is that what you're thinking? Oh no, we only have a budget of 400,000. And I've had this experience nearly every year with some particular government departments, not yours, where they've got a money allocated but they haven't scoped it. So if you actually get a scope in the first meeting and come back and say, look, the range of building costs for a basic building to a complex laboratory are this, you haven't said you haven't finalised your budget. You can do it almost within an hour or two getting a rough idea. And it's like a litmus test because we've got, can I say so? A men's shed. A men's shed. It was a shed, right? You know you can go and get a cost on a shed. But then it had to have disabled access and disabled facilities and a kitchen. And then it had to be warm, then it had to have mechanical services. What happened? Did you notice it's no longer a shed? It's actually a hall or an auditorium. And that just jumped 3 times in price per square metre. So we told them that, and then it came back and we got it costed, and then the job died and it got shifted. So we're now documenting it for the 3rd time with a 3rd set of fees, because we know how to scope fees and services now. And then we said this still exceeds your budget. And we put it in writing. This project is approximately this cost. Why? Because don't rely on a phone call. One of the first things we were told was to write it down when we did the institute registration. Write it down and refer to it. It may not save you, but at least you can refer to that thing and say, well, we told you on this. You don't want to ever get to the point where you say, I told you so. But as an audit trail, you say, well, look, we did make you aware that this was going to exceed costs, and you said, don't worry about a QS report. Let's go out to tender anyway, and it's come in within 10% of our budget estimate. So it's not your problem. You've just defined a process, and you've explained to them, and they're happy to go that process and pay you for that process. Does that make sense? So that can happen really early, scope and budget testing. Do you know anyone in small business who will say no to a project if they're offered one? I said no once to a government department for a library fit out in the city. I said, I'm too busy. Maybe it was through the BDO, I don't remember. And they really hassled me for a long time, and they had a go. I said, we're not going to offer you any more work because you're too busy. But the thing was, I couldn't deliver. I couldn't deliver to the standard we wanted. So don't be afraid to say no once you evaluate it, because it takes a lot to recover from poor performance. Most of our work is word of mouth. We did, I had an illness in the family, and I took my eye off the ball for a couple of months. And I had a guy who was a senior guy in the government department, Procurement Solutions, tell everyone, oh, Paul's dropped the ball. I've been working for 12 years, and I had a family illness to deal with. I didn't mention it to anyone, but I had to face some really hostile meetings for about a month. I explained what was happening. I said, oh, why didn't you say? But this guy had already done the damage, and I didn't get a job off that firm, that department for a year. And our firm had given me work for about 10 years every year until then. Because they don't like risk. You don't like risk, Melanie?
No, I've said that a few times. We transfer all risk.
Here you go. Yeah. But we want competitive fees.
Yeah.
And we want you to overservice. Thank you. Gets me out of bed every morning. You're getting a picture? It's there every day, every moment of every day. It doesn't have to be a problem. It will happen. Sometimes it will happen really badly. But just build in a process that you're monitoring it. Timing, programming. When does someone want to move in and for what reason? So we always, do any of you use Gantt charts, Microsoft Project? Learn to use them really well, because a lot of the builders don't know how to use them very well. That's terrible, isn't it? Some people who've trained in project management and in building, like here, who I went through uni with, know how to program a job. But you've also got to know how to build a job. So programming and not knowing how to build, that can be a mismatch. And so what a project manager who might be went through the trades, recently did a workshop in Microsoft Project, puts together a program Gantt chart, and it shows design documentation and tender docs this week, and then the building. And of course, you know there's an interactive, it's an iterative process. So briefing review, briefing sign off, ideally. Of course, briefing never signs off. Most of our jobs, the briefing's still evolving after the job's finished. I don't know why that is, but maybe they just love working with us. You need to know how to use a a Gantt chart so that you can work out how you will deliver your services and spell it out so you can communicate that to your client or to others. And when if someone comes back and you're engaged in part of the team, it's an important job, you can then respond in kind to a program that's delivered to you, saying, well, look, this is what we've assessed, can we talk about this? So you may, in 50% of the time, I'm not sure what the percentage is, you may need to negotiate and communicate and organise through a joint effort, a program that would enable you to do your job properly. Because many, many times, and I tend not to work so much for project managers, we mainly work under lump sum or construction management, where we employ a builder and they do the trade package tendering and we manage the rest. And we report to the client. Because that you then fit into their schedule, and so often you become like a subcontractor. And there's still a case that a lot of builders and project managers who trained in building rather than trained as project managers, do you know what I'm saying? They've come up through trades, they become project managers. I looked at a mechanical system one day and I said, blah, blah, blah. And this young project manager who was about 32, who'd done electrician, he said, oh, I thought architects only did drawings. And so you're also going to deal, even now, with a lack of understanding of what your skill set and your potential is. And you have to earn that street credibility as well. That's why we spend so much time on site. It's one of the best ways.
Well, did you talk about latent conditions when you're talking about that that school that needed to be redesigned?
The client just gave us $30 million worth of work, and he wasn't interested. So we have all this work, 7 projects, this one. I don't know whether I would handle it differently. I've got to say, we were tired and stressed and busy, employed lots of people, having trouble getting things delivered. So we just fixed it. And, even Ruby, my project manager, might say, well, next time we could handle it strategically. And isn't hindsight great? But it was a really busy time, and there was a lot happening, and I found it was just too much to take on as well. So we worked out how to solve it, and we ended up doing this work amongst the other work, but it was very expensive. There was 2 projects, lump sum tendered and managed, and no extra fees, and we'd already gone through it all. So we did it twice more.
Okay, so
it's a latent condition for sure, but latent conditions can be, okay, so this turns up, no one knew about it, it's under the ground, so there's a variation of the contract. But what do you do when you can't build the building there? It's a latent condition, but it's not a latent condition under a building contract. I never come across it. And I actually have heard others come across actually planes. There was some in a Braddon in the years following. I don't know what happened. Maybe they shifted the services. It was $212,000 to shift this. And so it was cheaper for the client to say, you fix it. And we're not paying $212,000. I wasn't very hard nosed with the client. The client had been feeding us work for years, and so we didn't want to lose that relationship. There might have been other ways to do it, John, but I honestly haven't thought that through. We moved on from it. What was that about? Local authorities. We list in part of our QA system every local authority we have to deal with on a project. So with the NCA, you've got works approval, and there might be this, that, or the other. With childcare, there's the Office of Childcare who have a jurisdiction over facilities and ovens, stoves, heights, and so on. There's the normal ones, compliance with the building code. So we list all the ones we need to do and then plug in when we need to deal with them. We spend a bit of time at the beginning of a job setting up a risk register and then a project plan, which sounds great words, but actually just try to identify who do we need to deal with and at what time do we need to deal with them. In the ideal, that's how we would do it. And you can't manage your projects to occur in a linear fashion or a sequential fashion that suits your skill set and capacity. It's going all over the place. You put out a tender and the client, in close your ears, Mel, the client will say, we'll give you a tender result next week. I've never had a tender result next week. They always take a lot longer, but the start date often doesn't change or the end date. So you just know that this is a real variable. And so every week we're having programming meetings to work out, okay, what's changed, what are we doing this week? It just calms everyone down. What are we trying to do? And so we create patterns.
Yes, minutes, Paul.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Well, I'll go through the slide. You've got the picture, haven't you? So what are we up to? Local authorities. Sketch plans. We talked about design and budget. Development approval. That building was stepped to get round trees. Casuarinas. There's no way the Tree Protection Society would budge. In fact, the Tree Protection Society has several people. There's outside the site and inside the site. So what do you do if the tree's on the sideline, on the boundary? Well, I don't know either still. We found out that some people who we needed to talk to who referred us to other people sat next to each other. And we had 6 months getting approval on this job, and they sat next to each other. And I can't say anything because all the local authorities, I need them to help me. But when we hang up the phone, we thought, oh my God, they sit next to each other. And we've been trying to get them to talk to each other for 6 months. It might have just been a bad day. You create a perception, but you sometimes want to go to the desk and say, hi, yes, that's where you sit, this is what I need, and develop a relationship. There's one guy to do, nothing goes out of this room, except it's recorded, isn't it? Like there was one gentleman who would always tell you his life story. We had to get stormwater approval, and we wanted stormwater approval, so we ended up having a chat for a while. Who's going to do the chat today? I'll do it. And so you ring up and you get the stormwater approval. That's not in any of the books, is it? It's just about working with people. I'll just go, there's a couple of things that came up. Who pays? If something's missed, if it's an omission, say if you leave out the hand basins and you have to bury them in later because you didn't document them, who pays for that? Well, the client should pay because it's an omission. If you specify a hand basin that goes in the job that's non-compliant and has to be replaced, you pay for it, or whoever specified it. So there's omissions and there's incorrect and non-compliant specs. We've got a few. What minutes have we got left? Because this is an important one that's come up.
About 5 minutes, so go ahead.
All right, well, I just want to tell you something. We came across something this year in a $9 million building and it got some condensation in it. What? I've just done a passive design course. In fact, we won Sustainable House of the Year through the HIA 2015 for a house that was 9.8 stars and only needed to be heated for 2 days. Its lowest temperature is 16.5 degrees, and it's a passive house. Heat recovery, ventilation, triple glazing, wrapped in the German membranes, the whole thing. This building that we did, it turned up a bit of condensation, and we couldn't work out why. So I've had reports done by people in Western Australia and England. I've gone to 2 other Australian consultants to do what's called WUFI modelling, W-U-F-I modelling, and we're also getting THERM modelling, T-H-E-R-M, which shows thermal behaviour of section details. And we've had a graduate builder from the Passive House course in Melbourne do a full inspection of the building. And what else? I've gone to industry to find out 4 particular leaders in the industry to do with insulation and membranes. And what I found was each company proposed a different solution, and in 3 of the 4 companies, depending on whether you went to Sydney, Melbourne or Perth or Brisbane, they proposed different solutions within the company. One company in the end said there's the best solution, this is trade response, this is a better response using our product, but the best response you need to use this company's product. That's interesting, isn't it? So the thing is, we were a bit surprised at this, so we did a bit of research because I still enjoy researching projects. We went to the building code. If you have a look at the building code under section J, have a good look at it, okay? Just spend 5 minutes on it when next year or whenever. And then have a look at NatSpec. And have a look at NatSpec when it talks about Kingspan, okay? Because that's a proprietary, that's a company who somehow have got themselves embedded in the NatSpec system aligned to, say, fiberglass insulation. So, okay, 2 things. There's Building Code Australia, then there's NatSpec. Then we went to Australian standards. If you have a look at Australian standards, do you know that this is a system that doesn't work when you get below 0 degrees, when you get frost? We had a builder, so we've got 2 jobs since that we've had to basically look at how we design roofs differently. We had a builder say, no, we'll just do it how we normally do it and I'll warrant it for 5 years. I went to 4 companies and the companies were ProClima, Kingspan, DC Tech, which is a firm that deals a lot with XPS, extruded polystyrene. And I went also to CSR Bradford. And then we asked several of their branches around Australia for responses. So we did research on 2 other projects. What I found was that this has come out, and can you see that says non-mandatory? So in terms of risk, find out what you can about condensation, membranes and insulation, because as we've got buildings, condensation, membranes and insulation, this lady was writing it down. Why that's important is the building code is putting pressure on increasing the insulation values, okay? Increasing insulation values. The next part of the building code and the trend is a tightening up of building air envelopes so they become more airtight. So we've done, my house has had an air tightness test, 31.8 air changes per hour.
Is this kind of thing that happened in New Zealand?
I don't know, but I'm sure.
Waterproof issues where they jacked up the insulation thermal barrier, but then the moisture couldn't get out, so
Yeah, that's what happened in one of our buildings. We increased the insulation, used XPS, there was less breathable building. We had so much trouble with air leakage. But we got to a system that we used a product at the advice of a company, and it turns out that maybe that product should not be used in sub-zero temperatures. But so that's well, I'll just stop at that. Then we did the research. So yes, there's a problem coming because there's a movement in insulation values. There's a movement toward a trend towards more air tightness. And the people we learned the passive house course of are now talking with the Building Codes Board, and they're looking at doing air tightness testing. Once you get to all that, and you take a high level of insulation and a high level of membrane and air tightness, so using windows that are airtight and using membranes that breathe vapor that keep air tightness, you'll find that there's a transfer from traditional insulation and sarking systems to modern systems. So it would be worthwhile you having a look at ProClima, which is German, ProClima. And this is an Australian handbook that's come out that recognises that this problem is going to happen more and more. Many apartments in sub-zero. So I mean, Canberra has frost, sub-zero. Many apartment buildings have problems with condensation, often in the plant rooms and the roofs. And that's because they're quite airtight inside them and have a leaky balcony and thermal bridges. I'm just saying this is an area that says is worthy of you guys doing some research in. So we tried to see if there was a path of looking at building code, NAT spec, Australian standards, industry documentation and so on, and you'll find it's inconsistent and it will not lead you to a result. Then we went to 4 leaders in the industry and we got inconsistent information from them, and so then we've gone to tried and tested results, and in the end this is some of the feedback. Is that interesting to you? This is just from one company and we sent them more options. So sarking from our system in Canberra is starting to go. And by the way, that's what the roofer recommended. But what's being recommended from CSR Bradford was to go to this twin batten system with their, I think ProClima is what they call it. But there's other companies that make better membranes. And this company here referred to ProClima's membrane, but only over the phone, because they don't have the membrane. So if you have a look up another product called Intello, INTELLO. Now the reason I mention that product, I don't have shares in the company. It's a membrane that changes molecular structure depending on the vapor and the temperature or something. And there's a 40-page document. So if you're in architecture, we're moving towards buildings that are more energy efficient, more airtight, and more insulation. And so this is a good one to actually have a look at from now on or next year. That was quite an interesting exercise. We spent a few months on it.
Just from your research on that,
Yeah.
did you find many German products within
Yeah.
the Australian market? I know they had the same problem like 10 years ago.
Passive House was developed in 1980, and their first passive house building was built in the early 1990s, and that's the course I did. That's the sort of technology we used 4 years ago when we started designing this 10-star house. So it's German technology, but these products have been around a fair while. But they were expensive, and we hadn't needed to use them as long as your building leaks air. As soon as the building, so passive house goes to 0.6 maximum air changes per hour, and our house is 31.8, the average spec comes about 15. And once you get down to between 3 and 5 air changes per hour, which means it's that airtight, then you're prone to condensation from vapor, just from people breathing. I thought that was an important one, John. If we've run out of time, I'm not sure if there's anything else I need to say.
So you were saying you had troubles with condensation in this house?
Oh, there was only a problem in a building we did.
Okay. Yeah.
That was much more carefully controlled insulation in the walls and the windows and ceiling. When we got to the roof, it was not done so well. The roofer didn't install this particular membrane per code. And then we stopped doing any more work on it because we had to think about it. And we got some condensation, so then we decided to work out how to fix it.
How did you fix it?
Basically turning a warm roof into a cold roof, which means dropping the insulation level down and then ventilating this space so that this membrane that's been installed incorrectly is allowed to be cold and stops getting the vapor. And it's not fixed yet. It's still getting fixed.
So during construction you found the issue?
No, after the building opened. Yeah, John only gets in people who's made mistakes for this sort of discussion. If I could have lost more hair, I would have on this, because It's a great building. It's a really beautifully made building. It's really well crafted. It's a laboratory building. But this thing just crept up because we've been working at various areas, improving insulation values, increasing insulation values and increasing air times. But then there's this small problem that occurred with a product, the way it was installed, the position of insulation relative to the membrane. So we've since learned that they're better reversed when you've got sub-zero temperatures. But why I showed you those standards and NatSpec and other things before, when you look at those things from 2015 when we designed it, and even now, except for this book here, sorry, I just wanted to show you, I've put the wrong thing. There's a book that's come out that's not mandatory. I would recommend you all read that. You can download it for free, I think. Have a look at it. Yeah, see that one? Have a look at that. Just read that as mandatory reading, like Managing Risk. That's a great one. So we thought that if we reviewed everything was available, it would lead us to a logical result. But what we found was it didn't. And this gentleman here, what's your name? Sorry. Bede. You referred, was it you referred to the New Zealand situation?
No.
Yeah. So they use a lot of this German technology in New Zealand, and I thought they were well versed. But you're saying there was a problem over there as well.
There's like a $400 million crisis or something.
Oh, really?
Shitload of houses that need to be
Okay. So it's worthwhile. But what I was saying was, even with all your risk management and with all the logical review of codes and standards and everything else, and then industry, we didn't get led to a solution. We're now using computer modelling from various firms to help finalise what we need to do.
In terms of the risk of that or the liability of that, if you had gone to all the effort of adhering to every code that was available to you and stuff like that, is it still your liability that building's developing condensation, or is it the installer, or who's?
If everyone did everything as it was meant to be done, and there was a problem, who would you sue? The product supplier? Well, that may still happen. The client engages the architect when it's an architect-led project. So that's the first point of sue, and then professional indemnity insurance responds, and then that company goes after the product supplier, the builder, the roofer, everyone. And that's what they do. But in that previous example, we had no one suing anyone.
Yeah.
And in this job, we're looking, I've talked with a lawyer mate. He said, a lawyer mate said to me, whatever you do not involve lawyers. Pull together, spend a bit of money, solve the problem, and get out of it. It'll be dearer if you work with lawyers. You'll get it fixed and cheaper. So at the moment, not everyone's agreeing to put in money. Anyway, that's another story. But it's something that came up since we talked last year, John, and I think it's quite a big one. There's a lot of things about tendering, and we select tenderers. We do a lot of work before we get tenderers on our list. We've got to know them, they've got a track record, and review their attitude, their systems, and even then they might take on 2 jobs at the same time as yours and get too busy. That'll do. Oh, thank you, John. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Questions? Well, that was good.
Are there any burning questions? Or have we dealt with that during the thing as well? I think you've been pretty comprehensive, Paul.
Oh, thanks.
So
All the best, everyone.
yes, thank you, Paul. Let's thank Paul one more time. Okay, so if you just give us a couple of minutes, then we'll get on to the next lecture.
Thanks very much, John.
Thanks for coming. Don't forget your
Yeah, that'd be good. That's cool. Yeah, so this one that came up, I think I thought we were making this solving a growing issue problem that's not being solved. So maybe we'll become experts in public contributions. But it was quite shocking to study floral gardens.
Yes. Okay.
Thanks everyone, all the best.
Thanks. I'll be in touch.
All right, Jonathan. Thanks, mate.
Shall we just keep going? Okay, very good. So that was the last guest lecturer and the last guest lecture. So what we'll do now is we will go through, give you some feedback with the with your group assignments. Now we've nearly finished grading. My terrible mistake was to have the hand-ins for all 3 units that I'm convening in pretty much the same week. So what has resulted in that is that the grading has been diabolically slow. So I apologize for that. But in this case, the good thing here is that it's not the late grade is not going to affect what you do next, because all these in this unit anyway, the 3 things have been considered as independent, separate things. So we will we'll continue to look at the grading and moderation, and then we'll get your grades in soon. But what we'll do today is give you a little bit of feedback on what we've noticed so far. Now, as for me, I think based not only on Bede's comments from last week, but also from reading the 3 assignments from that I've been grading, is that I think it was too broad in a way. Yeah, I needed to give you guys more information as to as to how to achieve things and how to sort out things. So in a way, I gave you the toolbox, but I really needed to be telling you which drawer to look in and which particular tool to use for which particular task. Now, it's easy to say, and I will say it, that those of you who got more feedback from us during the process did better than those who didn't. But on the same note, I think really, in all fairness, I should have given you more structures to scaffold the assignment, if you like. So because of that, our grading, we're going to change the way that we grade it, and so we're going to give you a discount for relative unfamiliarity with the subject matter. Okay, so what this means basically is we won't be grading you as hard as what we were going to grade you at. Okay, so
Sorry, is there an example you could give us as
yes.
to where we weren't specific enough?
Thank you, Peter. So yes, so today what I thought is, despite all of that, it's still important for us still important for you guys to know all this stuff. So I'm really going to sort of give you some examples as to how things could be worked out a little bit better. Okay. Now, where are my notes? So, generally speaking, and Mel might have something to chime in after I'm done, but pretty much there was some really good things. Like you guys all did the sort of branding thing was very comprehensive. So all that, there was absolutely no issue with the branding things whatsoever. The marketing things was actually also okay for most of them. Some of them, with the ones that I graded, were kind of unrealistic. So, but that is directly correlated to attendance in lectures and tutorials. Okay, so those of you who I spoke to, really, all of your projects developed quite well, relative to each other. Pardon me. So I think one of the things that one of the sort of common things, and I guess it's kind of expected, is because it is a kind of new kind of thing for you to do, is that your financial expectations were unrealistic. Okay, and that's okay. It's fine for it to be unrealistic because really you don't know otherwise. And really, what I did was I was a bit jealous. I was thinking to myself, why did I make this much money when I was at your stage? So I actually had to go back and like work backwards to see what your figures actually meant that you put in. And I'll go through that in a bit. The other thing was that your timelines were also a little unrealistic. So what happens is that it does take time to do a project, and many of you had sort of projects starting and finishing within one calendar year or one financial year. So I think that was, and obviously I'm saying it's unrealistic, but I'm not saying, I'm also saying that I understand why, those figures came up in your assignments. So really, when you're talking about fees, you've got to really be sort of looking at how long a project is expected to take, especially when you're doing domestic stuff. People change their mind all the time. Things happen, and as we've just heard. So there needs to be a bit of discount for that as well in terms of time. So really, if a project is going to take more than a year, then you can only be claiming the fees for the work that you do in the 1 year for that year. Okay, and this is generally how these kind of financial planning things work. Most of you were quite specific in terms of the assignment, so that was really good. Like actually had a plan of what you wanted to do, and very exacting as to what you wanted to do and how you were going to get it. Okay, so that was really good because it just demonstrated that you guys actually thought carefully about how to actually do it. I mean, there were a couple of the assignments really was just textbook stuff, right? So basically they just opened an office, and all of a sudden the first year they had 10 individual houses to do with a total construction budget of 10 million. So stuff like that. And no reason as to and no explanation as to how they managed to get all those clients. So I think all of you here certainly had clear plans that they were a lot more considered than that sort of attitude. On the same note, some people looked into the path towards registration a lot closer than others. So that was something that was important as well, because a lot of, a couple of groups actually just kind of glossed over the whole registration, the problem with getting the firm registered, if you like. And
can I jump in there?
Yeah.
Because a lot of the report was looking at the financial element
Yeah.
of it, and the time frame around it.
Yeah.
When you say people glossed over it, I think in a way we kind of glossed over it, but were unaware of how to show more when the figures and data that you're using is financial.
Yes, that's right. And I didn't mean you, by the way, Pete.
No, but I'm just more just like for me, because that was one thing that I thought was a weakness in ours.
Yes, but I'm
how you would involve that better.
I mean, certain people were just really sort of reciting back to me the registration process without actually explaining how they were going to get registered. It was just, we need to do this, this, and this, the 5 things to do for registration, and then we'll be fine. But, like, who do you work for? How do you get the experience? And how do you keep your firm going before you get registered? So not everybody considered that piece. So that's what I meant by glossing over.
Can I jump in just quickly?
Yes, better use this so it gets recorded.
I think that was the key thing, just to let John explain it, is when it was described how you're going to do it, not just these are the things that we had told you, that was when it became a lot more believable. So the ones that, what I found was actually each section of everyone's report was actually a bit different. So some sections are really viable, quite believable, and then I get to the next section, I'm like, oh, it doesn't have the same level of like explaining how it's going to be as viable as other sections. So they're a bit, you'll see when we've got to still borrow marks, but they are a bit up and down. And I would say it's really, I was looking a lot at, well, was it viable? Did you understand what you had to do to make your business viable? Were you just telling me the key things that we I mentioned? So it's, yeah.
Okay. It's not clear. So how do I get it clear again? It's auto.
It needs glasses.
That's not very clear, is it? But let's just look at this. So let's this one is actually my notes from what happened when we were looking at when you're looking at hours. All right. So I mean, what was difficult for you guys really, and understandably, was how do you work out how much time one has to spend on the project. So basically, and I glossed over it, but really I gave you what I should have been more explicit. But when I gave you that fee scale, you remember the practice note on fee scales, the one that we don't use anymore. What happens is that then had a graph which was the percentage fee against the construction cost based on the complexity of the project. Okay, so basically what happened with that was that I've developed all my fees based on those graphs because my fees came from before it was banned. And so what we see here on the top, just to get an idea as to time, what we see here on the top is essentially if we're looking at a 3-bedroom house with an area of about 250 square meters. Now the average house, the average size of a house in Australia is 231 square meters for a 3-bedroom house plus study. So if we take the 250 square meters and then we multiply it against $3,000 a square meter, so that's a rate that's pretty common. That's known to be realistic. It's not going to get you gold-plated tax, but you are going to be able to get decent house, decent fittings, good insulation, so on and so forth. So I've worked out previously that according to that graph, the fees would be 70,000. All right, it was a percentage which I converted to a cash amount. Now, if I was a sole practitioner and I charged myself out at say $180 an hour, if we divide the 70,000 of fees by $180 an hour, then what we would end up with is 389 hours. Okay, which is roughly 10 weeks worth of work continuously full-time, no weekends. All right, so that is a safe amount of time for someone who's experienced and fast. Now, if you had your charge out less for someone who was less experienced, then you get more hours. Okay, so I think this hourly, it was really good to see the hourly allowance included in all of your plans, but I should have explained to you that that's how I would actually work out the hours, and then you had to go work backwards from there. Okay, so similarly, with an extension of 200,000 with fees of 25,300 divided by the 180 would give me 140 hours, which is nearly 4 weeks of non-stop work. Okay, so what you can see there is that these figures, this 140 hours and this 389 hours was more than double of what many people estimated. Okay, so that's basically how I would have worked out that part of it. Now, so that's basically the basis, and that should have been the basis for your that should have been the basis for your figuring, and then to make discounts for not being registered and so on and so forth, which will allow you more time, and so on and so forth. So that's the first part of the formula. Now, what I will now do is go to teaching, advanced practice, date modified. So what I should have, I did mention that what you guys should do is actually a balance sheet, if you like. Now, I didn't mention, what I should have done is given you a bit of background as to what balance sheets look like. So essentially, it's an accounting device. You have two parts to it. So on the left in here, this part would be the debit side, or the expenses, or the outgoings. So essentially, what that is all the monies that the company or that the firm needs to pay out, right? And then on the other side, on the other side, you have your credit side, or the income, or the incomings. Okay, so with the debit side, essentially these are all the expenses. So now these expenses are based on my own expenses for last year. Of course, rent and power and utilities. The office I was sharing in provided all of this kind of stuff, right? They've provided me the desks, the printing, electricity, cleaning, toilet paper, so on and so forth. I paid for my own internet, and then I had to pay for mobile phone accounts for myself and my graduate. And then we spend this much on postage, stationery, so on and so forth. So as we move down, all these things are expected, photocopying or reprographics, professional subscriptions, which is, AIA and so on and so forth, and architects boards subscriptions, insurances, so work cover and professional indemnity, notes and magazines. This is just me, at the newsagents buying magazines of stuff that I like, and then sundries, which is basically conferences, registrations, flights, accommodation, marketing, so on and so forth. Now, some of this stuff might come back as income because the marketing. If I fly over to see somebody to try and get a job, and then I get the job, then I will get that money back. Yeah, but the other thing is basically consumables for equipment. Many of you got that, printer, toner, ink, what have you. And then depreciation is also another one, which a few of you had, and really that was, you're not expected to know something like that unless I tell you about it. But essentially, you can claim, depending on the equipment, you can claim up to 10% a year on the value of the equipment, with the understanding that after 10 years, the equipment will be worth nothing. Now, some forms of equipment will have a higher depreciation, and some have lower. So these things, this is just a kind of average. Now, one thing which was a common mistake was to actually split the salaries out of the expenses. Okay, so it was there, so I found it eventually, but I think it would have been good to have all of the expenses in the one side, and then all of the income in the other side, and then we could very sort of quickly then ascertain what the profit or the loss was going to be. So essentially, if we, by the way, this is the salary I wish I got. I didn't actually get that, and the reason why I didn't get that is the total of all of this is 158,460, with the salaries being about 135,000 of it. So really, you're talking about 22,000 or something, 23,000 being the other overheads, right? Being overheads, not being salaries. So on the other side, basically. Let's start from here. So on the other side, this table has an income of 160,000 and a profit of 1,576. Okay, so in order to get that small profit, which is 0.9%, basically what I needed to do was to have these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 projects. Essentially what you can see here is the construction, the cost of construction. So I needed to turn over 2.7 million worth of construction. The next one is the total fees, And then the next one is the amount of work that we had completed on that project, right? So needless to say, the yearly amount we could only collect on the work that we had done. So essentially, what you see here, if you have a house of 800,000, I'm imagining, from my experience, that you wouldn't be able to collect much more than half of the fee in 1 year, because a 2-year period is reasonable for a custom design house to be delivered from the time you get engaged as the architect to the time that defects liability is over and you can collect your last fee. Okay, similarly, you see here, I've got a couple of renovations here, and then I've just basically, some you're able to work through faster than others. And for small ones, you may be able to get the whole thing done in 1 year quite easily. All right, so really what it means is that in order to make 1% profit, which is fine for people starting up, because your aim is really just to try and break even. Yeah, so you have to be you have to have $2.7 million worth of construction on your books in order to do this. Now, if let's say we had another house on hand, right, that we had done half the work for, then you see our profit starts to go up. Okay, so if we had less work, let's say we didn't have this renovation. Oops. Let's say we didn't have this renovation. Then you see our profit starts to go down. Okay, so what you can see here is essentially if you think about this, if you've got to work on 1, 2, 3 or 2 houses and 1, 2, 3, 4 renovations, that's you can think about it. That's a lot of work for 2 people to do. Yeah. So what I should have told you to do, what I should have done is given you this right up the beginning, and then got you to basically have this table for each of the years that you're doing, year 1 to year 5. So needless to say, in year 1, you would not be making much of a profit, but then on the other hand, your salaries may be much lower, and then by year 5 you want to be at least breaking even, if not making a small profit. So that's essentially how I worked it out. It would have been helpful if I'd given you this in the first place, but I think it's also important for you guys to notice. So what I'll do is I'll just I'll load it up on the Moodle anyway, just for information more than anything, right? Because one of the things that I'm trying to do here is to give you guys a set of tools moving forward beyond this unit. Any questions so far? Does that all make sense? All the crossed arms doesn't look very good, but never mind. Okay, Mel, do you have anything to add in terms of the assignments?
Not really. No, I think this unit's just really been an opportunity to see some of the reality, and although you've been taught a lot of skills in creativity, so take those skills of solving problems, but you're going to face a lot of reality, and I think that's what this is meant to kind of show, both on the business side and the architecture. Yeah. Okay, comments? Beat, your comment is it's really hard to make money. Yes, it is, but legitimately, yes. But I do think, on the same note, it's good to know all this kind of. You see, I wish there was this kind of unit when I went through. I mean, the professional practice units that I had when I was a student was really, there was a lot of it. There was like building law, there was like specification writing, there was architectural practice 1, 2, and 3. There was contracts, and it was really training
me to go and work in an office and be a contract administrator. There was a little bit on marketing, but there was not really still the nitty-gritty of the business of architecture. So I think what's important about the business of architecture is also to know. I mean, I think now that you guys have done the assignment, and now if you then go through and are faced with this kind of issue and start applying to it, I think it's good to be able to know when it's not a good thing to do. Yeah, so it is hard to make money, but it's even harder. It's very easy to lose money. So, and it's also it feels very bad to lose lots of money. So it's good to have this sort of knowledge in order to figure out whether you want to be involved in it or not. Okay, so just one last thing. We'll have the exam next week on the Tuesday, similar like last time. Did you all get the message through Moodle? Yeah. So it will work very similar to last time. I think the thing is that with these kinds of exams, especially with the online ones, I am testing you. So what I'll be doing is writing questions of material that have been covered in the lectures, but I'll be putting it in a different way. Okay, so what you have to remember when you're answering the questions, I mean, the multiple choice ones are easier because you can just look at all the answers and consider them. But with the short answer ones, you need to be very, very, very specific. Yeah, you don't need to be long-winded. You just need to be very specific to the key words and the key concepts that are important in the question. So what you need to do is to be able to understand the question very, very clearly and know that my job in this process is to go out and put things in such a way that it's not familiar to you, and to make you try and analyze it and apply it to an unknown concept. So in other words, my job is to try and trip you up, and your job is to try and not let me get away with it.
Is this exam on every lecture, or is it on like since the last exam?
This exam is on every lecture since the last exam. Yeah. So the first lecture was on all of those. The first, I think it was something like 9 lectures or something, and this exam is on the following sort of 8 lectures or something. So I won't be asking any questions about what I've just told you today. So there'll be no questions about the assignment. Yeah. So the assignment is purely, a rolled up milestone, to use Gantt chart speak, and it will just be on the other lectures. So it will start. It will be. It will include Paul's lecture from today on risk. Okay. If you just answer risk is everywhere, you should be fine. No, only kidding. Because that was Paul, seems to be what Paul was saying. Yes. Only kidding. That's recorded too. Okay, everyone, thanks very much. And one last thing. Week 11 is the week to fill in the student feedback, the ISCQ thingies. So can you all go and fill those in, please? I mean, you've told me, you've given me most of your feedback, but it's always good to formalize these things. Yeah, good, bad, and indifferent. But it'd be really good to get the response numbers up, because that's our main problem. Is that we get we get only the people who think they're going to fail, who fill in the things and write bad things. But we'd like to hear from everybody, really. All right, thanks everybody.